Hello and welcome back to the next One Piece review and discussion. Yes, we are finally here after the weeks of breakthrough holidays and stuff. We are in full swing now into the 2025 slate of One Piece chapters, and we are picking right up from where we last left off last chapter with a hell of a lot more history and explanation to a couple things, with also some interesting developments. So, without further ado, chapter 1136, The Country That Awaits the Sun. So, pretty apparent what's being lined up here. Obviously, Sun God Nika being the reference and Elbaph being the country that is waiting. So we're seeing some connection that we've already known established. But the cover story continues on with obviously Yamato's pilgrimage around Wano, and after Hold'em had captured Tama and Tama broke free, they have him like as a hostage now themselves, and there is a mysterious hidden base in Udon that Hold'em has led them to. And the key feature of this place is the giant Who's Who roof. That is just a very bold statement. So I don't think this classifies as a hidden, like, mysterious base. It's pretty apparent. So are we going to see the Toby Ropo now showing up? Like, where's Who's Who at and all them? Because, again, there's the speculation that did Kaido and Big Mom actually die? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, it's left ambiguous. However, the Toby Ropo should definitely still be all around because they were probably put in prison like King and Queen were. So maybe they broke free. But nevertheless, last we had left off almost 3 weeks ago now. We had the introduction of Biblo, the ancient giant owl that enlarges things, inanimate objects within his space. So, assumedly, an awakened version of like a enlarge fruit, or a grow fruit, I think it was. Then we had Colin's surprise attack against Luffy, where it was then revealed Ripley is his mum, and that his dad is a pirate who doesn't fear giants. And he's not as old as Ripley, but he must be considerably old now. So, is it a returning character we've been waiting for? We are still holding our breath, but who knows what direction Oda could go. We then had obviously the God Knights showing up and attacking two giants on guard, wanting to find out where Loki was on the island. Which, again, of course, why wouldn't they want to know? And the last thing was the feast and drinking began in earnest, and Beard Hill Ja Rule attended the festivities with a giant sword straight through his skull. But it's fine, his helmet protected him. So that's where we pick up in the feast. We see Luffy absolutely devouring this moose meat that he says reminds him of like all the exotic meats he'd had previously, like the dinosaur meats and stuff. So everyone is in full sort of drinks and foods and just jubilation to celebrate the arrival of the Straw Hats, specifically Luffy, as Hyrule and Stanzen keep sort of hammering on that he is their saviour, he is the sun god. And it is Ja Rule who explains that, for most humans, they actually never make it up to the Sun Realm. Because when their ships come to Elbaph, they are greeted obviously by the underworld, and they flee in terror by what they see down there. So it's very rare. So they must have to be a strong individual to obviously be brought up here. And as he's sort of hammering away, Usopp is in his element, storytelling, recapping like his adventures probably, and we catch him in the moment where he says, "The mighty Oars, a warrior that is a legend amongst giants, was taken down by none other than me." So everyone's sort of ecstatic, and he's reveling in being on this island and telling stories, and even the warriors agree that Oz is an ancient giant, like he is the strongest of the strong. So for Usopp to take him down, these people are like, wow, this guy's pretty strong. But there is attention elsewhere around the party. We don't see Robin, Chopper, and all, and they're still at the library at this time. But we see attention drawn a lot to Jinbei, because giants haven't seen a lot of fishmen. So they're commenting on the colour of his skin, him being blue, him being like, the way he is. And they're like, well, we've not seen an individual like you, your skin tones, you're a fish from the sea. And then we've obviously then got all the giant women being fawned over by Sanji, no change there. And then there's comments about, Brooke, and like they've not seen someone like him specifically, and how he's come to be the way he is. And it's interesting that we get those little moments through the party of, everyone's just sort of like mingling and getting on with one another, which is kind of nice. And then we get a horrifying, destroyed, like, visage of Road, who has since been pulverized even more probably than the attack that happened, by Gerd, who is being forced to apologize to Nami and the Straw Hats for what he has done. And Gerd is stood next to him, and he's like, "Don't worry, I've still not forgiven him yet. He's still got more coming." And Road is the Sanji of the new giant warrior pirate, because he is still enamored by Gerd and Nami and all the other women. So I guess we've got some parallels there. But nevertheless, Zoro cuts him off and says, "Oh, don't sweat. I actually would have beheaded you if it wasn't for like Usopp stopping me. So you're welcome." And he seems really happy by that comment, but Road wasn't. And Gerd sort of makes the joke, as they're all laughing, you really should have looked at their bounties to know you never stood a chance against them. So Gerd is like, just don't hold back next time, just go for it. And even Road is like, wait, say it more. So it's strange, but I think the only sort of moment in this strange Road encounter is the fact that he says everyone on Elbaph shares the same dream: to become the next sun god and rule the world. And then Zoro's like, sun god? Like, what? And we see a fight, a brawl break out within the establishment they're in, the sort of town hall, like hut festival place. And it's a discussion between that the sun god is the god of liberation, or he's a god of destruction, or he's the god of laughter. So amongst people on Elbaph, the giants, there is debate as to actually who the sun god is. And Luffy's like, wow, it's getting real rowdy in here. And there is a comment made about the sacred Harley texts. So these are a generation old, ancient, archaic texts that are handed down through Elbaph. Now, no one can actually read this text, like this legend that has been written down in this sort of old mythological language. But since that time, there have been countless interpretations as to who the sun god is. And it is funny that Ja Rule's explaining this while the sword is through his skull, but the man's the oldest person there is, so why not? So no one can say for sure, he says, what these translations accurately describe. And the result is that the Harley texts say that the world has been destroyed twice before, and the name of the sun god Nika is invoked after each instant. So it was kind of implied anyway, but it means that in the timeline of One Piece, there have now been 3 instances of Nika. So there was the originator, sun god Nika probably. Then Joy Boy was the next iteration, and now Luffy is taking on that mantle. And it's interesting now that Luffy's hearing about it more, that he's starting to piece it together, this individual who Nika is, that keeps getting reference to his form he takes in Gear 5th, that is it gonna start playing into like the person he is, the will of Nika sort of coming through. And it is interesting to note, is Robin gonna be able to read this text? Because she studied so much, and is it eventually gonna be like Saul will go, Robin, there actually is something finally I wanted to show you, and it's the Harley texts written in poneglyph that you can read, because it's an old text that no one else can read other than Robin and someone with a third eye. That's why Puddin was captured. So interesting what will actually be discovered, because, like history is, texts get rewritten, reinterpreted, different iterations cause stories to like Chinese whispers and spread. So it's no wonder that there is a connection between a disaster and Nika, and from both sides, it's either he's freeing people or he's causing disasters. And we see, as Ja Rule explains this, a different interpretation of what the sun god Nika looks like. Now it is that white hair, white clouds billowing around the shoulders, and that shield and a sword. So I think in different ones we've had like a spear, but this is a sword. And it was only when I was reading this that I made the connection. Wano and Elbaph now have a unbelievably giant sword is like stuck in the ground. In Onigashima, it was the giant katana that I thought Luffy was going to pick up and use, but probably not. And we saw it in like just behind some of the big tree in Elbaph when we saw the big shot of it. A giant like broadsword that looks similar to this one, I guess, but I don't know. It's just a archaic drawing. Is it that he like the old Joy Boy made those swords so big that it retained its property when it was like drove into the ground? Because we're clearly being shown that there is a sword and shield resemblance in Nika. We saw it back in Skypiea, we saw it here, we saw it in Wano, that signature jump, that movement, but now with weapons in hand. And Luffy's never really used like those weapons before. So whether he's going to be adorned with these, or it's just part of like the fable of who Joy Boy and Sun God Nika are. But it is said that he is the world's savior or the great destroyer. So all that is known is that he is the herald for great change. So it is no wonder that the rulers of the day where he comes back would fear his return. So Luffy's like, okay, it's interesting that he's like talking about this. No wonder everyone's been saying I look similar, because Ja Rule is saying, he's adorned with white clouds, he's got white hair, his clothes become white, and he has a contagious, booming laugh. He is a symbol for the hopeless and the desperate to turn for salvation. And he's like, well, yeah, maybe it does have something to do with me, but nah, I don't think so. It sounds like this old legend. But everyone seems, to be booming about this. And it is Hyrule who says, for all Road is, he is actually right. We all share the same dream. If you are born in Elbaph, the dream is you want to become the sun god. And then this is where we get Loki's backstory. As Ja Rule explains, it is that same dream that has driven Loki so much. And his motives behind killing his father, why he's done what he's done, attempting to follow in the sun god's footsteps. And he says, it's interesting. And then Luffy's like, oh, okay, okay. So is Loki a good guy? Yeah. And then everyone's in this uproar being like, no, he is the accursed prince. It was prophesized before Loki was even born that King Harold's own son would be the one to kill him. And shortly after his birth, the royal steed, the horse of fortune, would died. And then obviously in the same year was when Big Mom killed or murdered Joe Rule, the other of the old warrior pirate captains that was like with Ja Rule. So everyone's furious about that. Then obviously the Queen passed away in that same year or the year later. So there is a subsequent run of like devastating incidences, and it said, Loki had just this natural strength, and he made the sort of realm of the dead his playground. He killed ferocious monsters, he tamed the beast, he even set a few on the village, and that was all by the age of 10. He was an arsonist, and his mischief endangered countless lives. And we see a shot of a more looking Loki now, silhouetted, but doing the Gear 5 like laughing pose, like hand on belly, hand on head, just laughing away. And it's like, look, he had the authority of a prince and a malicious personality, you know. And in the very castle up there is where he killed King Harold, the greatest monarch ever to live. He was a wise king who was connecting us with the outside world, who wanted us to sort of not be feared as the land of warriors anymore. And someone points up and says, Ja Rule was stabbed through the head by Loki, and he's like, oh, well, my helmet saved me, it's fine. And then Luffy's like, yeah, no, it didn't save anything. But it was then revealed that Loki's reign of terror came to an end 6 years ago, when none other than red-haired Shanks captured him at sea. And Luffy is even more enamoured in the story now that Shanks was here, and someone comments, oh, he was actually just here not long ago. I don't know where he's left though, but he was here earlier. And Zoro notices something, and this is absolutely incredible from our vice captain, his best friend, closest compatriot in arms. And we actually jump to the village outskirts where Zoro has pulled Luffy aside, and he's like basically heard the rundown from Luffy. He's got it out of him, and he's like, right, so that's why you've been acting so weirdly and you were on edge. It explained, but you realise that he's a reveled Kingslayer. You can't just trust what he's saying. He could be lying. And Luffy is enraged. And he's like, he said he knows where Shanks is. Do you know how badly I want to see him? And it's an interesting character moment. We've been following the Straw Hats now for years. Their journey so far has been what, close to 3-ish, 4 years now? 3 years? When Luffy had first set out. He has had chances before where Shanks has been mentioned, but he seems a lot more driven now and a lot more like sort of enamored or flustered or angry whenever Shanks is brought up. When Loki brought him up, he threw a punch immediately at Loki. When he's heard that Loki knows where Shanks is, he's agreed to help him. And he's now getting like angry again when, like, he doesn't, he wants to know where Shanks is. He does want to see him again, and it is a part of the whole thing. But what's interesting is the fact that we see this side of Luffy. It has been a long time, and the promise was, when he became a great pirate, that they would meet again. So whether it's Shanks wants him to become Pirate King before meeting him, or he's an emperor now. He's a pretty great pirate, but who knows when they're going to meet. But it seems that he's very intent on helping Loki and figuring out if he's telling the truth and whether he's up to this trick. And Zoro's like, I've not met him myself, but just on reputation, he could be lying. But there's only one way of really finding it out, and that would be to go and meet him myself. And there's actually a shot amongst that conversation where it's Loki in that moment when he was talking to Luffy saying, I'll tell you everything I know, and that includes the current whereabouts of Red Hair Shanks. And they are cut off by Nami being like, do you understand, like, seeing you two sneak off, I know you're up to no good, where do you think you're going without me? You just get lost. And it cuts to the Mist ship being sort of sailed by Road, who is now a third slave of Nami. Zeus clarifies, it goes Zeus, Sanji, and now Road is third. And they are heading for the castle. And Zoro's just going along with this. I guess it's because it is so important to Luffy. He wants to know about Shanks. And he's saying, right, okay, we'll get the key. We'll find out what he knows, but no funny business here. We'll take care of him if not. But if he does anything. And Rhodes sort of listening to this, like not making any comments about, the going to get Loki's key. But Nami seems a lot more obsessed with getting the treasure from the castle. She's still her cat burgling self. She's talking about, all this sort of wonderful treasure that could be there, and is it bad? And Rhodes like, oh, my vision's awful anyway, so I wouldn't know if you took any. And she's like, that's why you'll be brought along. But as they are sailing towards the castle gates, we jump away. We see the large shot of Elbaph, the 3 tiers, the giant sword, and we hear Loki's laugh bellowing from the underworld, the realm of the dead, where he is saying, oh, let me just understand then. So your offer is to free me, but, you want me to join the honourable, noble God Knights. Is that your offer? But you know what? I will have to refuse, because that would make you guys celestial dragons. And we see our 2 hooded figures stood just beneath Loki, all chained up still. And we see the sort of Shanks clone-esque individual who we don't yet know anything about, saying, do we have any intel about Loki. And we see more of a sort of image now, a more of a look at to the woman who is sort of joining this Shanks. And she says the only information or the only informants we had all were sort of cut off by a giant crow. And that's where the transmissions ended. So, their weakness is beyond belief, she says. But they have nothing on Loki. So she's like, I'm done standing by and listening now. And it is the definition of impertinence. So we get to see a full design of this god knight. And we find out her name. She is the god knight Junko, which I think I saw online the translation is like army child. So we see that she has mismatched eyes. One is like a black pupil, white iris. The other one is a black iris, white pupil. So it's all that mismatch. And we see that she has these like really long sleeves. And one of the sleeves sort of like rips apart like a ribbon into an arrow. Interesting. We've seen arrows like this from Eam. So, a couple of things this could be. This could be her actual devil fruit ability, where we don't actually see her hands because her cloak and her outfit is like quite long on her arms, that she's just able to turn the fabric into this like arrow. It's a power given to her or the clothing from Eam, or it's just an ability of something else we don't yet know. I think it's more the either devil fruit route or a power Eam is bestowed. She is a god knight, but it is interesting that her name translates to army child, so I assume she has been raised to be a god knight from like a child. She has been like born and bred to do this. And we can see a wolf appears, and Loki's like, "Oh, eat them up, wolf. They're all yours." And Junko is just not taking anything. She's like, "If you want to keep breathing, just get back." The wolf doesn't listen. She moves her hands, and the arrow-like sort of ribbon that comes off her arm or her sleeve wraps up around the wolf's neck and begins to hang him up. And as he is being hung in the distance, Shank's figure says, "Oh, we'll spare him if you change your mind." And Loki's like, "Okay, so this is how you operate then. But, I can accept my friend's fate, and I wish him a peaceful death. It is okay to grieve and rage, but a warrior never kicks and screams in the face of death." We see a really hardened warrior now of Loki, accepting, he's not going to buckle under his friend being like dangled in front, which is probably what Loki and like most other humans or people would do. Loki is dark, man. He is like, no, he got himself into that mess. I've accepted it. I'm angry, but I'm not going to act rashly because I will swallow all of my fury and I will use it to fuel me when I reduce this world to rubble. And that is where the chapter ends, with this declaration from Loki himself, seeing the wolf, and the wolf dies. Like, we see like a splatter amongst like Junko and this Shanks person, just like absolutely spray around the snow, and he is furious, but Loki isn't going to bow down to them. So whether they're going to leave at this point or they're going to cross paths with Loki and Zorro and that is interesting. But I mean, she's got a really cool ability. I wonder how strong it'll practically be. That or how far she can extend its range. Because so far we can still see like the coil around her arm that is like moving, and it is like broken from the arrow that is holding on to the wolf. So, an interesting ability nonetheless. Interesting to see where we go. Is Loki the bad guy? Is he such a bad guy? Who knows? But that about wraps this chapter up. No break next week, so we'll be back again. Thank you ever so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of this chapter. I will see you guys next time. Bye.